2 sharp breaths in the nose and then let it out. Ah. 2 sharp breaths into the nose and then let it out slowly. Oh. And one more. I believe this is called the physiological sigh. I got this from Andrew Huberman. He got it from someone else. It's good to take a breath sometimes. And to relax. This has been clinically proven to reduce anxiety faster than any other breathing modality. Oh. You'll notice small children, after they have a tantrum and they cry vigorously, they spontaneously afterwards, as the system begins to calm back down. We haven't talked much on this channel about the physiology of overcoming trauma, but we will. I wanted to talk to you today about two things that we need to prioritize. One is the physiological element of overcoming trauma. And the second thing that I haven't been prioritizing, I've left it implicit and I don't see many people prioritizing, is the importance of your reason, your ability to think reasonably in reflection of reality as it is, must eventually on your healing journey trump your emotional and subjective responses to reality. When you go online, as we are here now, you'll notice that there are videos that are posted and there are clips, and then if you look at the comments, it seems as though the people who are commenting aren't responding to the content of the video. And when you see this, this is because they are not. When a person has been victimized, abused, targeted for a period of time, that creates an imprint. None of us live spontaneously. Human life is not spontaneous. We come from imprints. We come from script. We come from myth. We're creatures of narrative, of myth, of story. And this is the essence of what culture is. It's an imprint. More often than not, the thing that carves into the clay of the soul of the human being is painful. Even culture is painful, is a kind of cutting off of spontaneity. You could argue that adulthood is painful. It's a cutting off from the spontaneous responses of childhood. You see small children in the world, and to use Freud's terminology, they're like little walking ids. They want what they want immediately and now. And if they don't get it, they get very upset. Today, I was walking down wooden stairs, and a small child of about 3 saw me walking down the wooden stairs, and she smiled and she looked up. And she thought that those wooden stairs would be very cool to walk up. She looked at them, she saw me walking down, and she was like, that looks dope. I want to walk up them steps and I want to walk down like this large human is doing, because that would be cool. It wasn't convenient at that moment in time for her parents, for her to just start walking up a random set of stairs. They wanted to move where they wanted to go, and they stopped her. And this was painful for her. It's not the kind of pain that's going to lead her to therapy in the future. Children can't just do whatever they want all the time. But the point is, they want what they want. And she went from smiling to not smiling real fast. She was very, very upset. She was enraged. Her father called her and she wouldn't respond because she really had the impulse to walk up the wooden steps. And he called her again and she wouldn't respond. And so he simply picked her up and took her in another direction that was not a direction of her choosing. C'est la vie, c'est la guerre. Life is suffering, my friends. The Buddha told us this is the way it would be. And she was very upset because in that moment, her will was to do something that she saw, but it was not in alignment with the will of the people who are protecting her and providing for her. They wanted to do something else. They didn't want her to go up there. When you receive your imprints from culture, as I say, these things are typically painful and frustrating, and adulthood is a sort of an overcoming of varying degrees of frustration and a sort of a cutting off from impulse. It is normal to be imprinted. It is normal to be frustrated. It is normal and natural. I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I think it's just, it is what it is. You want to communicate with other people, you're going to have to learn to speak a language. That's a bit of a pain in the arse. You want to function in the world, you're going to have to walk and you're going to have to run. And sometimes you're going to have to do things that are physically tiring and physically painful. And that's life. It's all good. However, there is a sort of a natural range of suffering and frustration. Um, I'm using suffering in inverted commas because it's like it's just life. And you could say that that is stress. It is stressful. Stress is good. We know this. If there is resistance in the environment and it pushes back against you and it's up to a certain level that you can cope with, it is good. It makes you stronger. There is no way to get stronger without resistance. When people lift weights, they call this resistance training. Resistance training is very good for you by every metric imaginable. You live longer, your hormonal profile is better, you will have more enjoyable sexual contact. You will, avoid osteoporosis. There's even indications that the more muscle you have, the less likely you are to develop life-threatening illnesses, so on and so forth. But that's all resistance, and that's within a natural range of stress, roughly speaking. When this natural range of stress is overstretched and broken, then we can start talking about trauma. Trauma, yes, I know, it's an overused word, but I don't think, as some people in this field think, that we should throw it out. I don't think it's useful to say, well, unless something really vicious and violent and worthy of a true crime documentary happened to you, it's not traumatic. I don't think that that's right. Nor do I think that every nervous system and every physiology in every human being is created equal. Some people do have, and it could be, it's probably genetic, a lower resilience to stress than others. So they will be traumatized by stuff that other people really are not that bothered by. And that's life. That's life. We're all different. When an individual has been targeted and victimized for a period of time and they are traumatized by that, it leaves a mark, it leaves an imprint. So if you imagine the human entity moving through time as we do, inevitably, sadly, I've tried to avoid it. There's just no way around it. We move through time. You'll come to realize that a lot of your reactions and a lot of your way of being in the world is rooted in the past. Of course, like you learnt English, so now you speak English, so you can hear me talking English and understand what I'm saying. But you learned this a long time ago, and it's not your language, it's not my language, neither of us invented it. We've learnt it from other people. And it's a weird bastardized pidgin language, largely of peasants. English kings and queens back in the day didn't speak English because it wasn't considered a proper language. They would speak German, they would speak French, they would speak Latin, but it wasn't until British monarchy had been around for a long time, that actually people started to talk in English. Couldn't be written for a long time. I think Geoffrey Chaucer was one of the, not the first, but one of the first authors to write it down phonetically, because it wasn't a language as such. Why am I telling you this? To reinforce that English, which you're hearing now and processing in your mind so intimately, even if English isn't a first language for you, if you can understand me, you're probably capable of dreaming in English. You're probably capable of thinking and reasoning in English. If Spanish is your first language, but you understand me fluently now, you can think in English. But it's not yours. It's not mine. It's culture. It's history. Every single word in this weird language that has one of the largest vocabularies in the world. It's so large that it's estimated that zero English speaking people know all the words in English, because there's just too many words to know. Why? Because it's drawing from so many different language sources. So it's loaded with history. So now as I speak and I say the word history and you understand it, this has historical context, which is past focused. We are very, very determined by our past. Switch gears. Not you, but imagine a theoretical human who has been highly victimized in their past, and all create it in your mind like a visualization. Here's the human being as a child, and then they grew into adolescence, then they became an adult, and they moved through time, and experiences are molding them and shaping them and cutting them and scarring them and tattooing them in a way as they move through time. And they have a matrix of understanding. They have a way of understanding and interpreting reality based on the experiences of the past. So we are creatures who interpret the moment and predict the future based on the past. And you ask yourself the question in your mind, is it right when he says that? Is it true? And you're thinking in an ancient bastard pidgin language in order to have those thoughts, which proves my point instantly. How would you know whether I'm telling the truth or not? You'd have to check reference points from the past. You'd be like, oh, where have I heard about that before? And is that true? Didn't I read a book about this? You have to go into the past. The past is powerful. The past is very relevant. So if a person was highly victimized and they're tattooed, they're molded, they're sculpted by victimization, their capacity to interpret the present and predict the future is heavily influenced by victimization. So in the online spaces, you can go and you can watch a 30-second video about this subject, a 60-second video about this subject, and then you scroll to the comments and you look at the comments and you'll say to yourself, what is this person responding to? Nothing in this video said this. So what are they responding to? And what does this have to do with trauma and trauma recovery? What they're responding to is an interpretation of the present that is heavily molded, sculpted, and tattooed by their experiences in the past. Because that is the entity that they are. That is the molded, shaped human being that they are. They're looking and they're like, where's the oppressor? And who's the victim here? And you could be like, well, we're describing, I don't know, we're talking about Star Wars, or we're talking about Lego, or we're talking about how to do a leg press, or something. Like, but they've brought an interpretation forward. Why do more traumatized people do this than people who are not traumatized? Because for more traumatized people, the past is heavier. It's heavier. It has more gravity. It has more weight. They're pulled back by the weight of those experiences. So imagine a human being as being like clay, and you were carved lightly. You weren't dug that deeply. You were molded, but you weren't dug that deeply. Imagine, though, another person like clay who was cut very, very deeply, who was molded too harshly by severe hands, by psychotic hands, by sadistic fingers, by hands that had no empathy or capacity for kindness or interest in understanding what they were doing to the human being that they were shaping. because they were maniacal, because they were psychotic, because they were very, very severely mentally ill people that shaped them and tattooed them and cultured them in a way that is predatorial and nasty and vicious and mean-spirited. So now let's pretend it's me. I'm the one who was overmolded, who was overshaped, who was cut, who was beyond stressed, beyond the stress limits into trauma. The weight, there's the clay, and it dips here. So there was a cut here. Don't talk to your mother like that, or you're going to get a cuff around the head. Not that big of a deal. There, somebody clapped you around the head. Shouldn't hit kids. Happens. Doesn't kill people. Okay, fine. Shouldn't hit kids. But this happened. So this is me. This happened. If you speak to your mother like that, you're going to get clipped around the head. It's not that big of a deal. It didn't ruin my life. Second scenario. Sometimes you can talk to your mother like that and nothing happens. And on other days, when you talk to your mother like that, you get a 6-hour-long humiliation and beating session. So you got the same baseline of life, the same behavior, does this for one person, and then for the other person, the same baseline behavior, a bit cheeky with your mum. One day it does nothing happens, and then on another day, there's this deep groove of trauma that's carved. A groove of trauma that's now carved into me. Why? I don't know. Maybe my father was drunk. Maybe it wasn't my father. Maybe it was my mother, and she's a meth head, or she's psychotic, or she's whatever, and it just rubbed her up the wrong way on a different day. And then you get this 6-hour example I gave of trauma, of abuse, of humiliation and physical abuse and so on and so forth. That depth of groove in the clay is heavier than this. So this one's this deep and this one's this deep. So these two people move through time. The ones with the shallower cuts isn't so determined by the past. The ones with the deep grooves and the deep cuts is heavily affected by the past. And for them, the past is very heavy. For them, the past holds a lot of gravity. So we're on YouTube, we're using social media. I show up to a video, TikTok video, Instagram video, YouTube, and somebody says something and they look like, or they sound like, or the way they're saying it sounds just like somebody who used to abuse me in the past. What happens next? Am I still in the present, interpreting what's there in front of me and accurately predicting the future and accurately interpreting the present? Or am I now, by some dark, evil hand, gripped by the nape of the neck and ripped backwards in time, suddenly, violently, viciously, to another period? Remember, we speak about, for PTSD, flashbacks. For CPTSD, we speak about emotional flashbacks. They're not flash forwards, they're flash backwards, back in time. And it's not called drawback or walk back or stroll back. It's flash, it's instant. I see the trigger context. Here is a man, here's a woman, she looks just like my mother. My mother used to talk to me like that. I don't know, they're talking about surfing or something. And I flash back into my heavy, gravitational, powerful past. I'm ripped backwards. Central nervous system activation. I'm now adrenalized. I see threat. What do? I could freeze, I could fawn, I could run, or I can fight. And what you can see sometimes online is you see people fighting. Who are they fighting? Are they fighting the person on the screen and what the person is saying? No. It's a solipsistic endeavor, they're fighting the internalized avatar of their mother, their father, ex-boyfriend, ex-wife, whoever the person who victimized them, who targeted them and abused them. They're fighting that internal avatar. And in the online spaces, what you'll see is the cognitive dissonance dance between two battling superego injunctions play out in front of your eyes. And you get like these long essay like clumped comments with no punctuation and no paragraphs, and it's just bleh. It's just dropped out. When we're heavily traumatized, we can expect our perceptions to be extremely dysregulated. We can expect to feel very tired a lot of the time, because if you're hypersensitive to threat, then the smallest stimulus in the environment could, or no stimulus in the environment, you could make it up. You could just have a memory, could adrenalize you and cause you to flash back into that period where you were being abused and where you were powerless. Salute. Adler is the third person in the triad. There was Freud, there was Jung, and then there was Adler. Very few people spoke about Adler until the Japanese book, The Courage to be Disliked, came out. Adler created the concept of the inferiority complex. And many of his best ideas were around the idea that that which dominated us in childhood, we seek to counter-dominate in a compensatory way in adulthood. That logic would follow that if something was dominating you and causing you to feel bullied and subservient and enslaved 10 years ago, you would now want to, in a compensatory way, dominate and enslave and damage that thing in the present. It's a very, very Adlerian idea. It's a compensatory gesture. There's even evidence that some of people's sexual fetishes, not all, but some people's sexual fetishes are rooted in this desire to take control of the thing, or a representation of the person, the thing. In psychoanalytic theory, it's all object. I'm subject. Everything is object. In adulthood, through directing libidinous energy towards it, and in that way fetishizing the thing, which is interesting, but not particularly relevant here. So people who are heavily traumatized end up flashing back regularly. They're hyperadrenalized regularly. So they're switching into fight or flight mode, which is enormously stressful regularly, which is exhausting, damages their sleep. We know from the published literature it encourages more negative coping habits, drinking alcohol, taking drugs, online gambling, shopping, you name it, to try to re-regulate these emotions, to try and get that dopamine back, to try and reduce that sense of anxiety, to try and reduce the sense of hopelessness, of impotence. You got to remember, in compassion to others, because you shouldn't just be thinking about your own healing journey. I think that's a terrible mistake. You should really try to expand a whole philosophical understanding for how humanity heals from trauma. That will help you to heal faster than if you just focus on me, 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 me. So for all people who are looking to heal, and as you're expanding that that philosophical perspective out, we should be saying, okay, so what's really happening here? Well, what's really happening here is the emotional flashback to the traumatized time is making the person feel powerless. What could a person who feels powerless do to feel powerful quickly? They could lash out with violence. Now, it might not be physical violence, it might be psychological violence, but at least if I'm lashing out and attacking, at least I'm not enduring the shame and the humiliation of feeling powerless. What else might a person who felt very, very victimized for a long period of time feel? apart from that shame, that impotence, and the desire to take revenge on the world and to take revenge on some people, assign targets, they would feel resentful. They would feel resentful of many things. They would feel probably resentful and unchecked, envious of other people. So if somebody else was successful in a way that they wanted to be successful, but they couldn't be successful because they felt crippled by their previous trauma, they would feel envy. So then you'd have this dangerous cocktail of envy, rage, resentment, and enormous daily suffering with confusion. Huge confusion, horrible confusion. You know, I've said on some videos, and people tried to take it really literally, and like, oh, Richard Grannon's admitted he's a borderline. What I said was, and this will be reinterpreted for all the reasons I've just given you. This will be reinterpreted again by people who are highly traumatized, who've created an avatar of me that is the enemy, that is the worst kind of person imaginable, and they work to, in their grandiose fantasy, to take me down as if I'm like on high and then I'm to be pulled down. When I was in my 20s and my early 30s, what I said was, I think if I went to a clinician, I think they would have diagnosed me with factor 2, possibly with factor 2 psychopathy and with borderline personality disorder. So there are certain elements. Borderline personality disorder is a complicated disorder, and it's a pretty wide, it's a relatively wide spectrum where narcissistic personality disorder and psychopathy really aren't. But in terms of the emotional dysregulation, constantly being adrenalized, constantly misunderstanding scenarios to the point where people would regularly ask me if I'd been tested for autism, saying socially inappropriate things, saying and doing things that were out of alignment with who I was. So giving a bad impression of myself as though I was a person I just wasn't. And then really struggling with feelings of, I didn't really feel the resentment and envy, but I did feel the powerlessness, and I did feel the rage. Why? So instinctively, when I go back to that time, the child in me says, because it's all so fucking unfair. It's all so unfair. Why did this happen to me? Why didn't it fucking happen to you? Why didn't it happen to you? Why didn't it happen to you? Why did it happen to me? That kind of sounds envious. Okay, so the envy thing is there. The envy thing was definitely there. I couldn't make sense of it. And I couldn't bring order to my thinking around these issues, where I would say, so I can't really say, hey, people with borderline personality disorder, I know exactly what your life is, and I've had exactly the same problem as you, and I've overcome it too. That would be great, but that would also be very, very dishonest. When it came to issues outside of myself, I could apply reason. I was capable of reasoning. So to come back to the point that I was making earlier, an important step in the recovery process is to prioritize reason over emotion and objectivity over subjectivity. I'm just going to turn off for 20 seconds. Stay there. I'm not abandoning you. See, I came back. Object permanence is a thing. Even though I wasn't in the room, you could still relate to me being there. There's a little borderline personality disorder joke, which will probably leave most people watching this cold, but there you go. And this is not some lame facts don't care about your feelings thing. I'm talking from within the realm of trauma recovery. When we're doing trauma recovery and we're doing therapy and we're going back into the past, let me say this. So there's the online character that is me, that everybody thinks is ENTP, extrovert. And then I meet people and they'll be like, I know your star sign, you're a Leo. No, that's a character that's required for the online space. I am a total introvert. And if you do, I don't do therapy. I do therapy like things with people. I used to do coaching, and we would try to fill in the blanks that the therapist couldn't. So when we would do that, and I would go into people's past with them, I wasn't like this. I wasn't like making stupid jokes all the time and laughing. It would be a very, very different me. Why? Because there's things that are appropriate and functional for therapy. And what is appropriate and functional in the therapeutic space when you're dealing with people who have experienced this kind of trauma, the instant image I get, it's a little bit graphic, but you can all cope with it, is like shrapnel. I got glassed in the face, and the damage that was done by the glass hitting my face wasn't the point of impact. It split the skin on my eyebrow. It was tiny shards of glass exploded into my nose, into my eye, and into my mouth. And they came out slowly. Pieces of them would come out for the next 12 years. They would just come out of my skin. I'd think I'd have a spot, and it would be a little shard of glass. Gross. Thanks for sharing that, Richard. But that is what the traumatized space looks like to me. That's how I visualize it. So I say, okay, we're now going into a space that hurts you the most and causes you the most confusion. I must tread carefully. This is not normal conversation. This is not the space to be being, jovial and messing around. Because if you have the trust to permit me, or to permit a therapist, or to permit a counselor into that space, and they say or do the wrong thing, and they knock the furniture over, they can do real damage. You've got to tread very, very carefully, very slowly, very patiently, and cautiously. Even when the client themselves is commonly being very violent with themselves, very impatient, and very brutal and self-judgmental, you have to be calm and slow. So this is the place where it's appropriate for us to say this is not a normal interaction. It's effectively a safe space. Your subjective experience is paramount here. Your subjective, not objective. Truth, reality, facts, history, interesting, important, but I really want to know how you subjectively think about this. And what else is of paramount importance here is how you feel about it. I don't know what really happened to you. This is me in the therapeutic space. I don't know what really happened to you. Probably you don't, because how were you going to remember? Like, when one of the major effects of PTSD is it damages memory. And one of the major coping mechanisms for trauma is dissociation. But how do you feel about it? What do you remember? What was your subjective experience? And that's very appropriate. So it's emotion first. It gives primacy to subjectivity. It gives primacy to safety. It gives primacy to being totally non-judgmental. Whatever you felt after that happened, you wanted to kill your dad, and you had fantasies about bashing your ex-husband's brick, whatever. There's no judgment there in that space. It's very important, and it's very helpful. It's a very helpful when you're doing this kind of work, and it's like bomb disposal. You got to be real careful. You got to be real slow, and you need to drill down to what's happening here in this space that is wounded, that is still hurt, and it's still hurt today. So why are you responding today like the terrible thing happened to you yesterday? Because your capacity to recollect the terrible thing is so powerful because of the gravitational force of the trauma that you are reliving it every day as though it happened today. So it may as well have happened today. So I'm not going to be like, oh gosh, still going on about this. Fucking 17 years ago, innit? Bloody hell, mate. 17 years ago and you're still going on about it. No, it's today. For you it is. For me it is. It's now. The body is not cognizant of time. The body, in a certain sense, not to digress this too much, but in like a mystical, spiritual way, that's the route to timelessness. That's the route to the eternal present, is through the body, because the body can't go anywhere but here. Space, time, what do you mean? Wow, man. It can't go anywhere but here. It's always here. It's always been here. So it's here. It's eternal. It's present. It is happening for you today. It is happening for you as though it happened yesterday, because that's the power of your ability to recollect it. Why is your body and your brain being so cruel? What's wrong with the amygdala? Why is it making you relive this trauma again and again, as though it was today, as though it was yesterday? Well, it's not stupid. You're not stupid. You're not broken. It's a good system. What it's saying is, hey, sound the alarm. There's danger here. When? Now. It's not here now. It's gone. Well, you didn't tell us that. We're just doing our job. We're here to warn you of danger. This context, that man, that woman, the way he's talking is exactly the way the abuser talked. I'm hitting the alarm button just in case. And so, meh, 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 you go into alarm mode, you're adrenalized, you're hypervigilant, and your whole central nervous system is activated as though it happened today. Because it is happening today. And all of that energy is coming back up. So all that to say, here's all the necessity for subjectivity, for safety, for emotion, for non-judgmental space and everything else, all very necessary within this therapeutic space. But you ain't going to live your life here, right? You ain't going to live here. We want a life. Well, I do. I want you to have a life. Like, don't follow me if you don't want to live. What a waste of time. Like, we're moving forward. We're not stuck here. We're not just cycling in orbit. We're on a journey. We might be orbiting, but the whole system is moving with every cycle. We're moving. We're moving. Where are we moving? Into the future, away from the past. Hopefully a better future, right? So you take all that and you go, this is all very, very important. But in order for me to get on with a life, my thinking has to trump the past. It has to trump the emotional flashbacks. It has to trump this confusion. The confusion as well. I meant to say this, so before I forget, the past happened. You're carrying it, not because you want to, but your body, your brain, the system, the mind body unit is going to spontaneously carry it to warn you from danger. You're evolved to like survive saber-tooth tiger attacks. If that water over there is bad because Og and Og drank it and you watch them die writhing in pain, you better remember the water is bad. It's like, it can't be optional. It's like, oh, why am I so anxious? So that you and your ancestors didn't die. Imagine having like a super cool attitude to another tribe attacking your tribe and being like, yeah, man, cool, whatever happens, happens. Those people lived. They really were born with genetically lower levels of anxiety. They lived. They're gone now. They all got kilted. They died. They all died. They didn't reproduce. They didn't procreate. We, the anxious, we ran. We fought. Or we got insomnia and woke up in the night and went, what's that? What's that? There's the rival tribe is here. I better go and check outside. Or there's some monsters. There's some wolves are going to attack us. I better go outside. And don't hate yourself for this stuff. We're only here because of this mental illness. What? It's adaptive. It's just not a good evolutionary match for this environment. Is it a mental illness to have insomnia? How many attacks were thwarted because somebody had insomnia? How many people survived to live and eat and breed and procreate another day because of insomnia? Because of look, it's not very PC to say it, but because of psychotic rage. You think psychotic rage? Oh, bloody psychotic rage! I'm such an angry person. What? How annoying is that? Can you not see where that might be adaptive in other periods? It's not very useful in modern civilization, which has existed for a nat far of time. But for the overwhelming majority of our evolutionary procedure, your so-called psychotic rage is what's kept your bloodline going. It's what's kept your DNA moving into the future. Because instead of a passive response to it, oh, we're being attacked. Oh, it must be the will of the fates. Oh, I'm getting my brains bashed in. No, you picked up a rock, you picked up a spear, and you got to work. That makes sense, right? Demonizing ourselves for all of these adaptations, the anxiety, the rage. I can't stop ruminating. I can't stop obsessing. Okay, it sucks. I know it sucks, but it's not there for no reason. It's there for a reason. And you're here because your bloodline, because your DNA did that. It didn't just let things go. Oh, the brackish water kills people. La la la, I'll drink a sip of it next week. Oh, that particular coloured snake. That's the one that makes your face turn purple and your eyes bleed. La la la, I'll just forget that information. No, it burns into you. You're like, no, I remember. That's dangerous. In the same way, you're going, remember. Guys who look like that and sound like that, who sound like my father, they're dangerous. It's not true. It's not objectively true, but your brain is trying to identify the snake with the yellow stripes around its eyes so that you don't get bitten. That's all. It's cool. It's okay. It's okay. But where it induces suffering, this is where we need to disconnect from it. And the point is, we are bringing, the body brain system is bringing the past out and forward. And then it is applying it like a filter on reality. It's applying it like the Google goggles that everybody's going to eventually stupidly wear and make the entirety of human civilization several clicks dumber than it already is. I can't live in the world without adverts running across my eyes all the time. Oh, look, funny teddy bears that I collect for points. What was it? It was the Pokemon craze. That'll be everybody's life soon, chasing Pokemon into traffic. Do you remember the Pokemon craze? Ah, so it brings all that from the past in order to try to protect you, and it colors the present, and it's damaging your ability to interpret the present, which is damaging the quality of your life. So we must keep in mind, as much as everything I said before is really precious and important in the therapeutic space, that's yin, that's past focused. We have to be balanced. We're yin and yang, polarities working together, integrated. We have to move it into the future. So reason has to trump the present, the future. My capacity to reason has to trump my emotions, and it has to trump this overwhelming response to bring the past into the present and for it to color everything. So I'm looking at the present and predicting the future with these goggles of trauma on. That's no good. I have a course. It's free online. If you look up on YouTube, Fortress Mental Health Protection, there's a whole course to help you reduce emotional flashbacks, to manage your state, and to help you in this process of moving away from being dominated by your emotions so that you can use your reason, so you can use your critical thinking skills. Do you know how many times a day I get people asking me, when is it okay for me to date again? How can I trust myself again? And I'm like, well, maybe you shouldn't trust yourself. As an example I give, I used to be a martial arts coach. For 10 years of my life, I was teaching self-defense, and I used to do it predominantly from the psychological angle because people knew I was into neuro-linguistic programming. And I'd get guys asking me all the time, can you make me more confident at boxing? I don't feel confident in boxing. And I'd say to them, well, are you a good boxer? And they go, no, that's why I'm not confident. And I'd say to them, so you want me to take your confidence higher than your skill? Yep. What good is that going to do? You still suck. You haven't spent the time developing the skill. You're just going to be an overconfident person who sucks. That's no good. We want authenticity. You want to move authentically forward with skills developed over time. And these are strengths, ladies and gents. These are skills. It is a discipline to develop them with consistency. It's not going to happen spontaneously. I've never seen it happen spontaneously. To overcome the issues of the past, you're going to have to face them, and you're going to have to forgive yourself, not just forgive your body and your brain. You should say sorry to your body and your brain for all the number of times you swore at it. I hate being anxious. Stupid insomnia. It's a stupid emotional dysregulation. Be like, yo, body, brain. So listen, I've been kind of a dick to you for years, and I'm very sorry. I know you're just trying to do your job. I also need you to work with me a little bit here because you're telling me things are threatening when they might not be. And that's damaging just all of us, man. Can we not do that anymore? So the emotional flashback work that you can find on the Fortress Mental Health Protection YouTube channel, that will help you. But have a will also to bring reason to any situation. I'm thinking this and I'm feeling this. Okay, you're feeling this. What are you feeling? This is emotional literacy. Well, I'm fucking angry. Why? Why? And what is it that you're feeling? You're not just feeling fucking angry. Be specific, be literate. What are the specific adjectives you want to use for how you feel in this moment? Dig deeper. Don't be lazy. Don't be reactive. Don't be sloppy. What are you feeling? I'm intimidated. I'm resentful. I'm envious. I'm short tempered because I don't feel good physically. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So you might think, I don't want to say that stuff to myself. That doesn't sound cool. I don't want to admit that I'm envious and short tempered. Well, here's the choice. You either admit to yourself how you really feel, which is going to be the pointer to why you feel that way, or you lie to yourself and say, I'm just fucking angry, and stay crazy in your eyes. Not in my eyes, in your eyes. Because if you're popping off emotionally all the time with no idea why it's happening, because you're not prepared to explain to yourself and have the good conversation with yourself what you're feeling, which is the indicator of why you're feeling it, you will assume you're crazy. Slowly but surely, over time, you'll be like, I'm a bit of a nut job, aren't I? Might not admit to anyone, but you'll be like, I'm a bit of a nutter. When you actually figure out what it is you're feeling with specificity, it indicates why you're feeling it. Yeah, some of it's horrible, some of it's shit. So what? You have a shadow. Boo hoo. You're not a perfect angel. You're not a perfect martyr. You're not a saint. You were a victim, but that doesn't mean that you're bereft of any darkness. You're still a human being, but you're not insane. You're not insane. Your responses actually make sense when you shift the perspective. You go, what did I experience? Man, my father used to talk to me like that. That was hard. That fucking sucked. The devil's balls. And I couldn't escape because I didn't have a credit card. I didn't have a car, and I wasn't big enough yet to punch him in the jaw. So I just had to deal with it. Wow, that sucks. The same way you have compassion for other people, you can have compassion for yourself. That was tough. That's a lot for a kid to go through. Imagine it's not me. Imagine it's my friend, or I'm going to pretend that I'm a psychologist and it's a client. How would I expect that client to respond? Two figures of authority, two people telling them what to do, two people saying to them, no, you can't do that. Oh, that might look and sound, this event here in the present probably looks and sounds like that experience that they had with their dad, which is going to cause them to flash from the present back into the past. And all of this emotional loading and this heavy gravitational pull in the past. And they're going to bring that into the present, and it's going to color the present and their interpretation of the present. Oh, shit. Shit, I've been doing that for years. God damn. Self-forgiveness, humility. You're not perfect. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You're a person. You're an animal. Wonderful, wonderful animal that you are. And there's pain there, and there's suffering there. Okay, now what? What are we going to do about it? What are the tactics? What are the strategies? How are we going to deal with this? Are we going to kid ourselves? Well, we tried that, right? Tried that for years, didn't work out too good. Or are we actually going to pop the hood, get in there, and start moving the things around that need to be moved around inside of that engine so that it works better? It feels nicer, La. Life is so much more pleasant like this. It's not confusing. It's so tiring being confused all the time. It's so tiring being in conflict with people all the time and conflict with yourself all the time. It's bloody exhausting. Who wants that? It sucks. Peace. Peace is a good thing. So in this journey, as you move from white belt, yellow belt, green belt, blue belt, and on, slowly, we should be making reason and objective reality that which is of primal importance. That's the value. When you make something primal and something else secondary, that's not to say subjectivity doesn't matter or your emotions don't matter. What would this be if you made everything about objective reality and just ignored yours and everybody else's emotions? Blank-faced psychopathy, probably. I mean, that wouldn't be cool. It's yin, it's yang, it's integration, it's polarity, it's life. It's an intelligent approach that accepts the entities that we are, the creatures that we are, and that we can move forward. 2 sharp breaths in through the nose. 1 long sigh out. 2 sharp breaths in. 1 long sigh out. Repeat another 8 times. Reason is important. What's going on with your body is very important. The entire time I've been doing this channel, the whole time, which had started in 2012, 12 long years ago, 12 years ago, when they took away my martial arts channel, bastards, Street Fight Secrets, which I began in 2006, and it only ran for 6 years. They took it away because it was too violent. They didn't like me teaching violence to civilians to stop violent predators from getting them. So they deleted my entire channel, and then we started this channel. The entire time I've been doing this, I do a lot of physical stuff. I walk quite a lot. In the last 6 years, I started dancing regularly. I do martial arts when I can and when my injuries allow it. But I'm in the gym lifting weights usually 4 to 5 times a week. And it's not about discipline. It's about keeping myself sane. There must be something that you do physically that grounds you back in your physiology in a positive way, that allows you to oxygenate yourself, that allows you to release your endorphins. And PS, this is what you're evolved for. On a daily basis, we should be doing what we're a good evolutionary match for. I cannot see anybody making decent recovery whilst being in really poor physical shape. I just don't know how you would do it. I cannot see anybody making good trauma recovery whilst being dependent on drugs, be they prescription or illegal, and or alcohol. I can't see it. 30-second break, and then we'll do some questions. Please make them one sentence long and have them end in a question mark. Da, 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 da. What question has no answer? This one. How to stop ruminating. So the ruminating is part of what I was talking about, being drawn back into the past, rooted in the trauma. So we have to deal with that as an emotional flashback. There's a free course on dealing with emotional flashbacks. If you go to Fortress Mental Health Protection System on YouTube, there's a whole free course there. So please use it. It is a strength. It is a skill. It takes effort and discipline across time for you to develop this strength and skill, but it's well worth it. What do you think about the studies showing that trauma can be passed down in DNA? Can we have someone else's emotional memories, flashbacks, and fears that are not ours? How to heal if unknown? I've not seen studies that actually show that. I've heard a lot of people online claiming there are studies that show it, but I've not seen them. However, in transactional analysis, which is the form of therapy that I am in weekly, they do say that you carry the introjects of your parents and your parents and your parents' parents' parents. And that when you interact with me, I'm interacting with the introjected parents, your parents, and their parents, and you're interacting with my introjected parents at the same time. Transactional analysis is really interesting. At points, it becomes almost psychic, almost psychic. It's very interesting. So I do think that that's relevant element, relevant. It's a relevant element. How to heal that if it's unknown? I don't think you should set up a narrative in your mind that there is unknown trauma in the DNA that is unhealable. Our task before us is simpler than that. Just heal the trauma in your life. Don't worry about that. Which course? Name, please. It's called Fortress Mental Health Protection System. Fortress, like a castle, mental health. If you put Fortress and Granin into the YouTube search bar, it will certainly come up con certeza. Thank you, Karina. Thank you, Jasmine. How to cope if you're married into a narcissist family. I don't do coping. I don't teach coping. I don't know what to do with how to cope questions. How to cope. Here are 3 tips for coping with a narcissistic family. Don't do it. I don't know how to do it, so I can't answer your question. If you ask me the question a different way, I'll certainly try to answer it. But how to cope is beyond the scope of my abilities, as awesome as they are. Elaine asks, severe betrayal. How does one come back from that? Um, so when this live finishes, it will automatically upload and you can watch it from the beginning. Where I was saying that the severity of the trauma that's experienced leaves deeper trenches in the clay of the human psyche. And these things have more gravity, they have more pull, and they create more of a tendency towards stronger emotional flashbacks. So, how does one come back from that? You must work through your emotional flashbacks, and you must develop your emotional literacy. Repetitive traumatic thoughts, how can I stop them? Same answer as the ruminating question. Um, these are emotional flashbacks, and they must be dealt with as such. So you're experiencing it as I just seem to be really reliving the traumatic event again and again and again. This is happening in my brain. This is happening cognitively. These are thoughts. Probably the thoughts are secondary to your emotions. You're actually feeling anxious and upset and dysregulated, as is natural, as you should, about things that happened in the past. And then, secondarily, the thoughts and the memories are triggered. Repeat offender, this time, really beating myself up for being so dumb. Help. You want me to help beat you up? No problem. As I say, I was a martial arts instructor for 10 years. You come down to the gym, we'll put a gum shield in you, and just tell me where you want me to start hitting you. I'll probably beat you up. You got to be careful with this kind of thing, you know? So you're a repeat offender. Okay, so let's imagine I'm your friend and I get into two narcissistically abusive relationships with a 2 year break in between them, and I know lots and lots about narcissistic abuse, and I still get into those narcissistic abusive relationships. How would you talk to me? Would you say, Richard, you effing idiot? Would you beat me? Would you kick me? Would you spit on me and say you're just an idiot? What would you say? Now, if you're a decent, reasonable person, you would say, hey, bro, because that's the relationship that we have in this story. You say, hey, man, don't beat yourself up. And I'd be like, but I did it again. I'm such an idiot. What did you do? What did you do? You played out a repetition compulsion based in trauma in childhood. Did you want that trauma in your childhood? No. But it happened anyway, right? Yes. Is it your fault? No. Does it magnetize you to want to repeat these relationships again? Mm-hmm. Okay. What were you trying to do? I was trying to be in love. Does that make you a bad person? No, Danny B. It doesn't. Are you a piece of shit for trying to be in love? No, I'm not. Is that what you would say if you were my friend? That would be a good friend, wouldn't it? You wouldn't be saying, you fucking idiot. Because that would be a bad friend. So if you're capable of being a good friend to me and of being forgiving towards me, what makes you so fucking special? What are you, a narcissist? You think you're special? You deserve special beatings for doing something that everybody has done? Why? Aren't you a person the same as me, the same as everybody else? Do you think you're better than me? Then why would you deserve special punishments? Why do I get kindness and compassion, but you get special and specific tortures? That's not very fair, is it? No, you're just a person too. And you were trying to make a connection. You were trying to find love, but you were magnetized towards an abusive person through your experiences, I don't know, childhood, adolescence, or wherever, and you made a mistake. It happens, right? Don't be nasty to yourself. Let me be nasty to you, and at least one of us can enjoy it. Miranda asks, what do you think about the notion that NPD, BPD, and psychopathy are one and the same? Yes, probably are. These are just models for a spectrum of observable behavior, and that the disordered personality revolves around all three. Probably yes. Probably yes. Based on this now 12 years of study, I would say probably yes. We're really talking about the same thing at heart, but they do show up in very different ways. I noticed you didn't mention histrionic personality disorder, the fourth part of the cluster B spectrum. And I'm not sure where histrionic fits either, or whether it really is just a permutation of narcissism, and whether narcissism is just a permutation of psychopathy at heart, at root. Let's see, question mark, looking for a question mark, question mark. What would you call an abusive ex who thinks sex is an olive branch? I wouldn't call him. I would block because forget about the sex being an olive branch thing, which is boundary blurring and a little odd. You said he's abusive. I think that's the end of that story. He's also your ex. He's your abusive ex. Highly diminished or zero contact would really, really help you to get on with your life. CJDV Chris says, show Richard some thanks and smash the like. Very good of you. Yes, please like and share, etc., etc. As someone with 2 slip discs and disc degeneration, would you still say no? Pain medication? No. What? Do what your doctor says. If they think you should be on pain medication, then what? Would you still say no to pain medication? When did I say no to pain medication? I mean, me personally, I try and use as little pain medication as I can, but no, if you need pain medication, your doctor's prescribing it. I don't get that. Yes, take with slip discs and yes. What? Yes. Take your pain medication. Good Lord. Severe betrayal. How does one come back from that? Hey, I think you asked that before. UG Rose is here moderating. Thank you, UG. Now you're just trying to induce an anxiety attack. I must be very far behind in the questions. What is your perspective on epigenetics? Oh dear. Well, I, like many people, misunderstood what epigenetics was, and then I had it explained to me properly recently, and I went, oh, it's only that. Oh dear. I thought it was something completely different. Have a little look, spend 15 minutes researching the clinical literature on epigenetics, and don't learn about epigenetics from viral TikTok videos. Yes. He's asking about pain meds because you mentioned recovery being near impossible without being clean. Legal or illegal? Oh, no, I meant the abuse of prescription drugs. Don't because some people abuse they'll abuse Adderall, they'll abuse pain meds, and yeah, But if you're being prescribed it for a reason, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Just don't abuse drugs, be they be they prescription or street. Really be very, very careful with them things. Ancient bastard pigeons. I think pigeon, when you're talking about language, is anyway. Yes, ancient bastard pigeons. How can I help my adult children who are victims of MPD abuse by my ex? How can we help anybody who's experienced narcissistic abuse at the hands of anyone? I mean, you can open a conversation, you can open a dialogue with those people and say, hey, how are you finding communication with this person? What do you think is happening here? How does it make you feel? They're adults, so you can have an adult to adult conversation with them, which is great. And then you could introduce to them the idea that there's more than just a little bit of like casual lying or manipulation going on, that you're of the opinion that it's something more. And then you can start sharing material with them and see if they vibe with that, and if it works for them, and they think that seems to be what's going on as well. So just a conversation. I think a lot can be done with conversation. If a flashback triggering situation, says Azima, renews negative reactions despite extensive therapy and shadow work, sometimes years of hard work, does it negate all prior healing efforts? Well, it's not necessarily renewing it if you've already worked on the trigger. But it bothers me. This question bothers me because it implies that the therapy work that you've done hasn't made you feel like you've definitely reduced the power of the emotional flashbacks. Because I say that because when you've actually done the work to reduce the power of the emotional flashbacks, you have. It's not like, oh, maybe it's so with the emotional flashback work, which was work I focused on for about 5 years. It was the predominant focus I did. Back me up on this in the chat, by the way, folks. If you did this work with me, when you work to reduce the consistency and the potency of the emotional flashbacks, there's no doubt, right? You know that you've reduced the frequency and the potency of the flashbacks. Please let me know in the chat if that's right. A lot of the feedback I've got from people is like absolute in the past is yes. So it bothers me that you said you've done years of hard work, shadow work. I don't know what that is. Jung never said. Jung has a concept called the shadow, but he never said shadow work, and he never told us how to integrate the shadow. He kind of vaguely implied that as you move through life and do therapy and have insight, that you would, it's like growing older, you would integrate the shadow. But he never gave us shadow work, so I don't know what you were doing there. But you've done extensive therapy. But you're worrying that even after the extensive therapy, that if you have an emotional flashback today, it's going to be as strong as it was the first time. That bothers me. It suggests to me the therapy that you were doing wasn't right for you. And that you might have been talking around and round, but not getting into the grit and getting into the engine of the system. Because when you work on the emotional flashbacks, they really go down. So to wit, Victoria here saying, yes, 90% reduced with 18 months of work. Julie says true. Ava says truth. Ava Truth says 100%. Yes. 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 So if you do, it is brilliant work, says Roots Home. Flashback reducing. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yes. And I haven't had many people over the years say to me, "Yo, I tried this stuff and nothing happened," or "Oh, the flashbacks got worse." So good news. Um, Go do the free course. I mean, good news. It still worked. Like you've still got to do it every day. And at first, you really should be doing it 5 times a day. Which don't worry, don't stress. Like the 5 times a day, it takes about 60 seconds. But if you stick to the 5 times a day and you give it 60 seconds, 5 times a day, it, what did I used to say? Something like, I mean, my God, if you really do it 5 times a day and you do that for a month, you should be measuring the level at which the emotional flashback frequency and intensity drops. It really should be going down by 30 to 40% minimum. Why? Because why would it be so effective? Because you haven't done this kind of work at all, and nobody seemed, or very few people seem to be teaching it. So it hasn't had that kind of special attention, and it's very specific. It's not generic. It's not like gaze into the mirror and tell yourself all my emotions are valid. It's not that. It's not that. It's much more. It's much more granular. Um, it's tactical. It's like do this, do this, do this. Now what? Do it again. Do this, do this, do, and you literally count it off with the 5 fingers of your hand. The things that you need to be focused on. Um, so what tends to happen with negative emotion is we push it away. And so with this, we're not pushing it away. You're looking at it, but you're not just holding space for negative emotion. You're actually trying to process the negative emotion, and it doesn't hurt. I mean, let me know in the chat if it hurts or it's distressing or painful. It's not painful. It's not distressing. It's maybe a little bit boring. It's not the most convenient thing when your alarm goes off and it's like, fuck, I have to do the exercise again, and you're trying to park the car. I remember like doing it once. I was trying to park a car in the supermarket and I was like, oh God, no. But then you just do it and it works and life is easier. Life is better. Do a few more questions. Does it concern you if Trump wins the election? Let me take a quick break and then we'll do the last few questions. What exercise? The Reduce Emotional Flashbacks exercise. It's available for free. Fortress Mental Health Protection System on YouTube. You seem like you want to stop bad enough. You will just don't be upset when you fail. Just keep trying. It will work out. Pray, pray, pray. My son left me a disgusting voicemail. I still went to help him as he's sleeping rough. Am I right in taking a step back now as I've reached my limit of helping him? Am I being unfair? Well, that's really tough. I mean, I never had kids. Um, but I had people who I loved who were hell bent on destroying themselves. And, if you don't have power over somebody or a situation, it's very hard at a philosophical level to say that you're wholly responsible for that person or that situation. He is an adult. You can't, if you could force him to not, to change his life, you would, I presume, force him. Who wants to watch somebody, destroy themselves, especially if you love them? But there is a limit, of course. There's a limit to what we can do for people. And another factor let me be careful how I phrase this. I don't know you, I don't know your situation, but speaking from my personal experience, one of the things I noticed was when the person knew that I would come running to try and help them, and we were in the Karpman drama triangle, which is from transactional analysis. Karpman drama triangle, where you can play victim, you can play savior, or you can play persecutor. When that person knew, this happened to me 3 times roughly, but with one particular person in my life. When they knew I was going to try and play savior, they behaved worse than when I gave up, and they knew I'd given up. They knew I'd stopped. Their behavior altered. Sometimes, maybe not in your situation, maybe this doesn't apply to you, but sometimes we operate like systems. The human being is a system. Our interactions with other human beings is a system within a system. And you are part of this cycle. That's undeniable. The energy that you have been giving to this has brought this result. You're at your limit, you say. Maybe it's time to bring a different energy to the scenario and see what happens. In my experience, the 3 times this happened, every single time at the point where I said, okay, well, I give up. And I didn't just say it, I meant it. It was from the heart. It was like, I'm really giving up. And they really felt it. Their behavior changed. Their behavior changed. So systemically, something altered and it changed the whole outcome. I'm sorry to hear about that. It's a dreadful situation. Okay, start. 1, 2, 3. Pa, 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 pa. Poop. Okay. Do you believe narcissists are inherently malicious? Yes. Or are they sort of on an autopilot due to childhood trauma? Yes. Yes to both. Bit of both. Yes. How do you conceptualize that? Well, they're living for narcissistic personality disorder to be narcissistic personality disorder. I deviate from the ICD definition and the DSM definition now. I always stuck to the DSM definition for years. For it to be narcissistic personality disorder, in my humble opinion, the primary thing that needs to be present is a psychotic dissociative attachment to a grandiose but delusional version of reality, of themselves and of the world. So the primal thing is the narcissist's false self, which is another way of saying the narcissistic role play. So they're playing a character in a story. The character doesn't exist and the story doesn't exist. They're making it up. That character and that story is fundamentally malicious to all other human beings in its coordinates, in its essence. So before the question was asked, is psychopathy, BPD, MPD, HPD all part of the same thing? And I said, yes, I believe that it is. So psychopathy is sometimes referred to as antisocial personality disorder. And for the layperson, that's a bit confusing because if we say somebody's antisocial, that means they just don't like being around people. They're schizoid or introverted. They just find people stressful. But what it means is that if there is social interaction that is normal, civilized, cooperative, and coordinated, they're against that. So the psychopath is against the grain. Maybe we shouldn't say antisocial. Maybe we should say anti-civilized. Anti-civilized personality disorder. Anti-cooperation personality disorder. Anti-positive group outcomes personality disorder. That's what antisocial really means. It's just not well named. Well, I think NPD is a manifestation of psychopathy, and I think it's antisocial in its essence. So yes, it's a malicious fantasy, but it is a fantasy. And is it due to childhood trauma? It's probably a combination of genetics and childhood trauma, based on what is in the peer-reviewed literature, based on what we can know about these things. It's most likely going to be a combination of genetics and environment. So yes. One more question, and then it's time for bed. Jeffrey Beddington. UG Rose says, you can say it and hit the like for appreciation for him teaching the masses. Thank you, UG. It's very kind. Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate your feedback to my questions. It's really a heartbreaking situation. I can only imagine. I can only imagine how painful that would be. Do you have any advice for weaning off prescription dependency? No, my dear ones. No legal advice, no medical advice. My goodness. Do you know the trouble I could get myself into? Such as benzodiazepines, good lord, to sleep every night, and Adderall to wake up and function every morning. Okay, here's something I do know. If you come off benzos and Adderall the wrong way, without specialist medical oversight, you can get very, very, very sick. So you're already dependent on these things. It's time to get good medical advice, not just generic medical advice, because some doctors don't specialize in this. You need to try, and there's forums, there's YouTube channels. Try to get high quality information on coming off benzos and coming off Adderall. We don't use them as much in the UK. I know that it's way more of a prevalent prescription in the US and Canada, and I've had clients who've come off. I had one client go cold turkey. This is years ago. I didn't tell her to do this. She just announced to me one day, after telling me the FBI were watching her. She saw the face of an FBI agent in the curtains. She went cold turkey on Adderall, and it can induce psychosis. Benzos can make you very physically sick. So look, don't just find medical advice, find specialist medical advice. If you're going to come off these things, you must be very, very, very careful. I am not a doctor. I am not qualified in any of this stuff. Get specialist advice. Please be careful. Please be careful. I do know, like, coming off this stuff can be very, very dangerous. Even doing it right is not easy or safe, says Da Bao. Yeah. Yeah. So people are relating stories of benzos and the coming of benzos in the comments. You gotta be careful with this stuff. I thought some of your material was hard, and I often quit when it got uncomfortable. But kept going back, and it was so worth it. These courses saved my life. I just have to say thank you. Thank you. Yeah, some of the material is tough. I think one of the hardest courses I ever released was the Unplug from the Matrix of Narcissistic Abuse course. And I knew when I was making it, I mean, it took me, it's the course I worked the longest on. I think it took me a year to develop it. That's a tough course. It works, but it's hard. The emotional flashbacks material that we were talking about before, plus the emotional literacy material is pretty straightforward. I suppose emotional literacy can be hard for some people. Emotional flashbacks, you should get a lot of bang for your buck, as in you get a lot of return on your investment, and there's no investment because it's free. The emotional literacy stuff is a little bit more challenging, but again, if you put the time in, you will, like, inside of a couple of months, you should be feeling a lot more sane, a lot more calm, and a lot less confused. The other material, the other courses, summoning the self was hard. Heal the superego had some hard bits in it, but the unplug from the Matrix one is tough. It's really tough. Oh, look, Michael Lee says the Fortress Mental Health channel is the best mental health content on YouTube. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Smouse says summoning the self was lit. It was litty, for real, on God, all facts, no cap, yo. And on that merry note, I think we should end. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. I hope that that was useful. Please like and share it if it was. And I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Cheers.